On January 1st of this year, something happened that nobody put on the news. The oldest baby boomers in America turned 80. That sentence sounds boring. It is not boring. It is the starting gun for the largest movement of money in human history, and it is already making people millionaires who have absolutely no idea it is happening to them. Right now, this year alone, $6 trillion is changing hands in the United States. Not over a decade. This year. Money moving from one generation to the next, mostly without headlines, mostly without anyone watching, except the banks, who have been preparing for this for 20 years. By 2048, that number becomes $124 trillion. To put that in perspective, the entire United States economy, every business, every paycheck, every transaction in the whole country for a full year is around $27 trillion. This wealth transfer is worth more than 4 entire American economies, and it is moving from people who built it slowly over 60 years into the hands of people who, in some cases, are about to receive more money in a single afternoon than they earned in their entire working life. So who exactly is getting rich from this? And more importantly, who is being quietly left out of the biggest financial story of our lifetime? Let us start with the part almost nobody is saying out loud, because it is the part that explains everything else in this video. The wealthiest 10% of households in America are responsible for the overwhelming majority of this transfer, not the wealthiest 1% making headlines for their yachts. The wealthiest 10%, the doctors, the business owners, the people who own their homes outright and have a retirement account that quietly grew for 40 years without them paying much attention to it. Wealthier boomers are more than twice as likely to leave an inheritance to their children compared to poorer boomers, which means the gap that already exists between rich families and poor families in America right now is about to get inherited, copied, and handed down to the next generation almost exactly as it stands today. If your parents had money, you are about to get a head start nobody can compete with through hard work alone. If your parents did not, this entire trillion-dollar story is happening completely without you. That is not a guess. 70% of millennials expect to inherit something from their family, but the actual money is concentrated so heavily at the top that most of those expectations belong to people who are going to receive far less than they think, while a small number of families receive almost unthinkable sums. Now here is where the story gets stranger, because the people inheriting this money are not handling it the way their parents did, and that is rewriting entire industries in real time. The generation receiving this wealth grew up watching 2 market crashes before they turned 30. They do not trust the stock market the way their parents trusted it. A recent survey found that 53% of millennials want exposure to private investments instead of traditional stocks and bonds. 62% are actively discussing cryptocurrency with their financial advisors. Compare that to their parents, where only 38% were ever willing to take real risk for real returns. This matters because trillions of dollars are about to get redirected away from the traditional investments that built American markets for the last 50 years into crypto, into private equity, into things their parents never touched. Wealth managers are openly admitting this is the biggest risk they have ever faced. Not a market crash, not inflation, but losing the money the moment it transfers, because only 19% of people who inherit wealth keep their parents' financial advisor. The money does not just move between generations, it moves between entire financial systems. And here is something that should make you sit up if you work anywhere near real estate. For generations, the single biggest asset a family passed down was the house, the picket fence, the paid-off mortgage, the place where everyone gathered for holidays. That story is ending. Families that built wealth through property for generations are now watching their children deliberately diversify away from real estate the moment they inherit it, choosing private equity and global property markets instead because they do not want all their eggs sitting in one neighborhood the way their grandparents did. $25 trillion of this transfer is projected to end up back in real estate eventually, but not in the way you would expect. Not single-family homes with picket fences, international property, luxury markets, real estate as a diversified investment vehicle spread across multiple countries, rather than the one house everyone grew up in. Now, let us talk about the $18 trillion that is not going to children at all. $18 trillion of this transfer is heading to charity before 2048. That is not pocket change being donated as an afterthought. That is more money than the entire economies of Japan and Germany combined, voluntarily redirected by people who built fortunes and decided at the end of their life that they did not want all of it staying inside their own bloodline. This single detail tells you something important about how boomers think about money that their own children often misunderstand. Many of them are not trying to create dynasties. A significant number have openly said they want to give their children enough to make life easier, but not so much that it strips away the motivation to build something themselves. 61% of wealthy families are actively worried about how inherited money will affect their children's drive to succeed. Some are deliberately structuring trusts to release money slowly. Some are not telling their children the full size of what is coming at all. So here is the uncomfortable truth sitting underneath this entire trillion-dollar headline. If you are in your 30s or 40s right now and your parents owned a home, had a retirement account, built any kind of business, even a modest one, you are likely standing closer to a financial windfall than any generation in modern history has stood. The numbers say 70% of you expect to receive something within 5 years. But if your family never owned property, never had access to the stock market, never had the stability to build anything to pass down, this entire wealth transfer is happening completely without you. The gap is not closing during this transfer. Research is already showing it is widening because the families positioned to receive are largely the same families who were already ahead. This is genuinely one of those rare moments in financial history where you should ask yourself a direct and uncomfortable question. Are you on the receiving end of this transfer, or are you watching it happen from the outside? 72% of Americans say they do not feel confident managing a sudden financial windfall if one ever arrives. So if you are someone who might actually be on the receiving end of this, even a modest version of it, the single most useful thing you can do right now is have the conversation with your family before the money moves, not after. Ask what is coming. Ask in what form. A paid-off house is a completely different situation than a portfolio of stocks that needs active management, and most people inheriting either one have no real plan for what happens next. And if you are watching this and realizing you are not on the receiving end of any of it, the lesson is not to feel defeated by a number you cannot control. It is to understand exactly why this gap exists, the assets, the ownership, the decades of compounding, so that the wealth you build from here forward becomes the very thing somebody inherits from you one day instead. The largest transfer of wealth in human history is happening right now, quietly, without headlines, while everyone is distracted by everything else in the news. Some people are about to become millionaires without lifting a finger. Others will watch trillions of dollars move past them entirely. Drop a comment and tell me honestly, are you expecting to inherit anything in the next 10 years? Or is this the first time you are even hearing about any of this? I want to know how many people watching this are actually part of the story. If this opened your eyes to something you had never connected before, share it, because almost nobody is talking about this clearly. And the people who understand it first are the ones who end up positioned correctly when the money actually moves. Subscribe for more of these. See you in the next one.